let's go ahead and get started. It is Monday, July 27th, and this is for the physicists that are waiting for this notation here. And this is the perfect timing because it could be easily correlated with what is happening within the nature of the stars, so to speak, with this full moon in the sign of Aquarius, and it all wraps up with this specific with this specific specimen calculation. Now, let's first speak about the fundamental parts of when we're speaking of an Aquarius moon. Even though we know this isn't about astrology and it's not about psychology, it's about science. Now, but I will use some examples regarding how when you add something as topical as psychology that is taken as a specific determinant of nature and experience, and how we know that that's not actually a fundamental part of what derives from what is already set. And we're speaking about what is already set is regarding the mechanics of the universe itself, and how it overrides any type of topical expression of collective, what they call it, conditioning, which would fall in the lines of psychology, not science. So it would be, even if you're speaking about any type of genetic predispositions not falling into the lines of psychology either. They will fall into the lines of science and neurology, neuroscience, things like that. So they're very quite different. Now, it falls in complete alignment with the mechanics of the universe and its nature, its continuous nature, and what is derived of, and what it becomes within a predefined axis of what is. So we're gonna with Aquarius, and we can associate it with this in the moon Aquarius. If you look at it within that type of collective lens, because it would represent the specimen population, which would be the people like that. It represents society, so that would be each person like that. Society isn't an element or an object, is a this person, that person. So you're speaking about the specimens themselves when you speak Aquarius. And with Aquarius energy, it would be taking the specimen board in total, but then taking the topical, superficial, minor distinguishments between each, and dividing dividing the whole of the specimen into those segments based on the topical, superficial, non-scientific relations. So, for example, that's when you take, like, as an example, so we could speed through this and get to the science. We take, for example, what people call experience. Okay, we're going to group this group by their experience, their group by their shared experience, their group by their shared experience, or their group by their likeness. It would have to be superficial and topical because it would be non-scientific. In these groups, they share and that's a neat and orderly way to create segments within a specimen group, and create a topical, superficial, individualistic identity, even though it's this group like that. in view of a specimen board. So it's all surface. Now, and then you could even add the psychology of the shared experience. That's not psychology, it's not science. You could add you could even add things with psychology like maybe trauma and wounding, shelter, topical. You could add things superficial. You could add those things because it can't go into science because it's dealing with a specimen board and the individual basis for the separations to create a distinct or individualistic superficial nature is based on, can only be based on what is superficial. Now this functions because when we look at science and we know what a specimen board is, it is a collective consciousness. It is a hive mind consciousness. Now, obviously, people that aren't scientists, they spin that as something positive. It means we're connected, we're conscious. Well, we know with science, and I'm speaking to scientists, that, and this is the report regarding this and leading up to what happens. So and how it happens, and us knowing that what a collective consciousness or a hive mind is, it is it's created within the cosmos around around a, not the, significant explosion within a specific area of space. Now, and it is a collection of debris that has it's a collection of debris that has no independent utility. It cannot independently act, be, experience at all. It is a collection of debris that has minimal proton firing. So it would be in the dust charging from the background radiation, it knocks electrons off of the extragalactic debris, giving each microparticle significant permanent electrostatic charge. That's the way that it functions. So it is a collection of, we talk about science and we're out of the Aquarius of this, but then the independence duality is there. It's like, but not experiencing what is experienced as individual experiences. They are experiencing from a field extraction of one basic universal, because there will be one consciousness like that, a hive mind consciousness, like a one consciousness. So an experience that they're having is from a field navigation around the explosive event that creates what one could call experience that they are actually involved in, with little and small variations, because they cannot experience anything independently. So anything that they call experience, because of the nature of what the debris that creates the consciousness, anything that they call experience is just one field representation of a mass that they are experiencing, that one, but experiencing with small variations that they call unique individual experiences, like that. So they're experiencing the same thing with small variations. Now, the extent of that small thing and what those small things will consist of obviously depends on the protons that are fired and the dust particles that are charged within the greater whole of the consciousness. So when we speak about so what this brings about here is, so that's the basis. Now what this brings about is that within their consciousness, and we'll just call it glue. There's particle gluons that hold this together, this consciousness together, because the consciousness has to be held together by specific quark material and binding substances that hold the microscopic substances that hold the consciousness together in place like that. Now, because this is collective, this has to be held together. Now, and because of what started this and what created this, it created the consciousness, it was a explosion. So that's what detaches it like that. Okay, so what it creates is what it detaches. Now, but because this is, because the universe and every aspect of it, there's no aspect of the universe that is not of a continuous mechanic like that. Now, so that means that it whatever becomes doesn't cease. Now, just like with some areas of space, it is whatever a new becoming within space is not quantified as new, because it's becoming from a already defined area within space. So it's quantified as a continuum. Now, so when let's going back to this, when you speak about this sticky glue that binds substances together on a microscopic level within the universe, obviously that sticky glue is different because we're speaking about different spaces within the universe, and when we're speaking of different spaces within the universe, we're speaking of different collections of time coded within atoms. So we get to the get in great detail now and into mathematical structures. So in different quantitative formulas and relative chains of mathematical induces that create what the universe is as it relates to its formula of continuum, which is where we apply where I, as the super scientist, apply mathematical formalism to observe those variations. Now, so when we're speaking about this glue and strong nuclear forces, which a strong nuclear force is what created a consciousness. And it was create a collective consciousness, what create a hive mind consciousness, and mind going not with the specimens psychology, which isn't science, of mind meaning we do the same thing, or we were conditioned, or we following this, and not that type of mind. Mind meaning the consciousness that is within, that was from that explosion, that has the most charge. Now, that this debris, when it became a consciousness within this area of space within the universe, it's magnetized to this mind like that, to this consciousness that is only one element in all of the specimen collective, are just debris from that one element. And what they call experience, it comes from a field, excuse me. And they're having a one field experience with small variation like that. Now, is that with small and minor variation, and they could maybe at a psychological, when psychology, which isn't science, they can call it the uniqueness or different, but it's not, because at the courts, in the core of things, they work as one. They work as one like that. They cannot do and do not do anything independently. Now, apart from superficial independence, well, I choose to paint my hair red, or I'm going against the grain, but not really, because when they're called back into and they only can go so far, and then they're called back because psychology and collective does not have any bearing on on consciousness. And consciousness is what the universe was constructed of at its time of induction. So let's talk about these gluons. And in the microscopic glue of this portion of the universe, you would be in the mechanisms, the gluons that act as is exchange particles, or like you could say like gauge bosons that glue quarks together to form protons and neutrons. This is the actual consciousness. This is the mind. When we speak, when science, when you hear hive mind, we're speaking about this, not hive mind. We're following the grain of the group or the condition. Not that. That's psychology, and that's nonsense because it's meaningless. It means nothing. Because when these dust debris ignite, it overrides anything they're talking about, and because they're just one thing. They're just one mass object. That can only name or explain individuality through a simplified metric of its individual experience that is very topical and superficial. And does not measure them as, in science, does not measure them as an independent unit. It measures them as their cohesive commencement and permanency. The physics of what they are. So even speaking to them, you're just speaking of one or two of that consciousness that would be having an experience that is relatable to all of it, because they cannot have anything different because of what the core cuts of what they consist of as one conscious unit, a hive mind. And the mind is the dust and the neurons and protons within this explosion in his commitments of becoming into being. Now, but that's not what we're going to speak about. We're going to speak about when they like that, but have to magnetize by the but have to magnetize it, but then have to magnetize it like that. And this happens at the microscopic level in this positioning within this position of space. Now, this position of space as a study is what is the humans as a collective. It's already figured out, but because that's just related to there. But this area of space within this positioning is what is the causal structure of how these charges take place in the area of space where the explosion happened, and this is the sediment and where it remains, and it does not move within that. But the field expressions around it from one specific field in general that is conducive for this type of strong force that has the relevant markers to so what is that telling us scientifically? Does it tell us, you all that are physicists, does it tell us that within this field there's a radioactive nature of continuous, I don't know if it would be, we could call it, we can't call it an echo of explosion, because that would mean that this field would just be mirroring a more expansive environment beyond it, like that. And it would be very much, and this is just the stasis of where that explosion happened. So what type of magnetic field would be beyond it that could create this like that? Now, and we could to speak about how that shows up within the specimens. Now, so we're speaking about the strong force that bind and created the collective consciousness, the interaction is the strongest of the four fundamental forces, but in how it overcame that intense electrical repulsion of positively charged protons, and that's what would have created them when we call it them that mind specific there for this, as opposed to the universal mind, which would be the total of everything. Now, we're speaking about a collective consciousness here that is isolated, that was able to we're not speaking of the universal mind, we're speaking of a collective consciousness that was created during this space and time of an explosion. Now is and remember, because when we're speaking about this, remember this glue is operates as a constantly changing state of quartz that keeps the consciousness tightly bound. Because you're speaking about a collective consciousness, it's tight. There's a collective consciousness. There's a hive mind, and it only happens in this small area of space. The universe itself is not a consciousness. The entirety of everything is not a consciousness. It's a different type of mind. It's the mechanics of everything. Now, with science, we know that we take this and take that, getting very detailed and take that. So we're speaking about a consciousness. We're speaking now about a consciousness, now a collective consciousness. Now, okay, that the specimen board is connected to. Now, so it can be looked at as we could call this, because of the type of glue that would be that bounds these quartz together to create a consciousness. It would be like I've spoken about the plasma connection in one of my works in the past. Now, so it would be where we go into the quark gluon plasma, we speak about extreme temperatures that come from this commencement of this explosion. Now, but if you're having the magnetism, it would be, we would speak about what would be within this area of space that holds that that magnetized debris, where the consciousness can, in the field representation of what they call experience, when you're speaking about the subject board that has little small variations within the nature of what is running the mechanism beneath their surface level, what they call independence. So if we get into that depth now, but we're speaking about those microseconds after the explosion that happened, that would have taken place in high energy particle collisions, and that melted the glue first. The explosion, it melted a glue. Now it would have to, but it magnetizes it back together, and that's how the consciousness has been working since this positional coming into formation happened. Now, So when you speak about and because the consciousness is only a collection of dust and debris, and you speak about free roaming particles, from the melting that created that came from the initial explosion in the microscopic plasma, where the quarks and the gluons floated freely. If they had to have come a perfect near clear liquid before cooling and binding back together. Now, but in order for this to happen, which is the meat and potatoes of what I want to speak about, it would be coincide with what else is going on within this space in time, in the matter, in the actual matter around the collision, the first collision point that brought their consciousness so that they can function into coordination. It will be where what is going on around with that keeps that consciousness so that they can continue. Now, but we want to talk about the temporary breakup or tearing of the magnetic fields in this type of kinetic energy from the plasma motion, because obviously it would have had to have a very significant explosion for it to come into formation and be a consciousness. And so it takes the same thing so that they have the temporary breakup and they can function temporarily as a unique, independent, incomplete, collective consciousness, incomplete as individualized motion and existence, existing as a fired neuron, like it is temporary. That's why it'll come back together. So what breaks it is kinetic energy, because what formated was a significant blast. So you speak about plasma movement. So whenever something is happening in the cosmos, in this specific area of space of consciousness, it can temporarily break them up and they're able to temporarily bring them back together. But when they're broken up temporary, they can rush into directions. So they're really not broken up, but it'll still be in a very uniform way. It's like it rush, but then and they can function like that independently, but they're not independent. In the time period of them functioning like that independent, now we're aligning it with the specimen board. It would be a very short time period, or it could be a very long time period. Time will be calculated differently within this area of space than how it hits within them on Earth. Now and then it'll bring them back together, and they'll start functioning as one like that. Even though when they're back, they're functioning as one too, but differently. Okay, now, so and when they start to and because of you had the free flowing debris around the initial explosion, it means that it calculates itself with time of when they come together, and it can be measured, and then when they break apart, and it can be measured because the free flowing debris it specifies a specific time within space that coordination is changing of coming together, and now it's time to come together, and now it's time to do like that. So they do it like it'll linger in as the last has, and then the last ones have, and then the last ones have, like that. It does it like that. Now, so that lets us know that's how it functions with the specimen board, meaning humans. But with so in the cosmos, it would correspond with the free flowing debris from the initial explosion. So and we can measure time is measured through that regarding their behavioral mechanisms, which are already predetermined within this mind, and what is coded within the within the atoms that create it when we get into it deeply. So and then we get into, if you're speaking about the fields around it, and what creates the only one experience that they are all having, with minor variations, no matter how topical or unique the experiences appear on the surface, and how you apply psychology to it and all that, which none of that is science or important or relevant to the nature of the mechanics of how the universe actually functions. Now, so when you speak about stretching fields and because we know that plasma is highly conductive and it drags, and that would go with the free flowing, but we use that to calculate space and time and observe measurable okay, and then we can apply that to the collective board of specimens there. Now, so when we talk about the mechanical motion of stretches and twists and forces opposing magnetic fields, is the thing is, because when you're talking about consciousness, it's dangerously close together. Now, but they cannot function independently, even though they may see themselves as independently. The specimen board sees itself as independent, but it doesn't have all of the mechanics of what a conscious independency is, and that's related to the charged neurons and protons and dust around it, is around the impact of what caused it to be and to come into being and be able to function at all and have any type of experience of being able to be within a one. Here is just one field experience there. Now that is experienced with small variations like that. So, and it causes, so at the collective board, it would cause them to feel, at the collective specimen board, it caused them to feel a connection like that to one another, but they only just have one experience. They are just one thing. Okay, now their delusion is that they're independent. Okay, but that's outside of science. Now, so when we talk about the snapping point of this, and this always comes, this is rotational, and we can categorically time it based on you measurable if you look at the specimen board, but then we can just measure it from what happens within this space within time, and it's just the same old thing. It's nothing is going to change there. So and we're talking about time. The only different thing is we can calculate what time means in this specific space and how that time period hits on Earth. So okay, so that would be the only differential equation. Now, and that's mathematically calculated with a very it can't be as rigid and fluid as mathematical formulas. It's not applied here because this is just one time. It's like, this is just it. Okay, so that would be the calculation point. Now, so when you talk about the snapping point of when they go away from one another, the conscious mind, like, because it does it because of the initial of what created them and brought the consciousness into being. It would go away from one another. Okay, in that time period, it'll be away, but it's still as a consciousness like that. So this very small time period, which could be a long time when you have to calculate, then it comes back together. It always magnetizes back together, and they just function. So when you talk about that snapping point, it's kinetic energy and forces, in these opposing fields into that highly compressed zone of the initial. We would go back to the initial explosion point. When the laws of that type of breakdown happenings, because you're going to the laws of physics within that specific environment, and how these magnetic field, the magnetic field temporarily snaps and breaks, and then it has to magnetize back together because it's just one thing. It's just one consciousness. Now it's just one mind, and then how the return happens. So what can be experienced now is it does that because of a a stored magnetic energy that snaps like a rubber band, but it has to come back together. And there's a predetermined space within time when that coming back together is. Now, but what we're going to talk about, and then you talk about the cosmic aftermath, what we're not going to get, I'm not going to get into that. We can go into depth of how it affects the people, which would be obvious too, of how there's just always, so it's for them, they'll rush back in together, and then they have to go about that because they're just one thing like that. Okay, so is where and they, because they operate without independent neurological components, because they are of this substance and debris. So is in the I spoke some years ago about these dormant neurons and dormant protons, because of this area in space where this debris would have formated and came into being, and that's where their consciousness and where they derive from, and their energetic forces that are already set that maneuver them. So you talk about extragalactic organic cells within this entity structure. So what would be happening is that And if we want to get into true depth about it, and we get into the velocity phase of the space synchronization, and we're talking about, we would apply that more to the specimen board of looking at what's happening there and knowing what's happening there, and then the specimen board there as that how it affects the earth, like that, and that consciousness, like that, how it affects the collective specimen board that of this neuronal synapses is what it is there. So when this specific electromagnetic, not even electromagnetic, electrodynamic coherence, because they're already but this happened. Okay, now they're in about to go into this phase, and then obviously they'll come back to this. Okay, this like that. So they're about to go into this now. So in how that functions with them, it will be they'll function as the same thing, but in a sort of cosmic independence that is linked. They'll be doing the same like that. Okay, and then they'll go back to this when that specific time capsule there is functioning within that range. It functions within that range of definitive time for that specific envelope to. These are plasma envelopes to be within that range of how it functions. Now, the most important thing is for me is the cosmic background radiation from wherever this field system would be coming from. That is the experience that they are having, but having it in minor variation, no matter how topical or superficial or psychology, the non-relevance of what they call individuals seem to them like that's not the mechanics of what they function by. We're talking about the machine behind how they function when you're speaking about physics. So that's that. I may do a part 2 with this. Because this it would be very in very detailed and in depth, so it can go with a great application to your other works, because we're speaking about permanent electrostatic charges when we're speaking about dust charging, and the dust charging is the consciousness consists of the debris of the impact explosion, like that, and what magnetizes it together. Which for me, in my work, it would be how what was around the impact affects the consciousness of it being able to have maintained itself for the time period that it's maintained itself from its first induction until and being able to represent itself in that sameness of mathematical consistency to be a sustainable consciousness that is the motor of the specimen board, the mechanics of the motor of the specimen board, like that. And you all know, with especially with the secret society, which I created with science, is that I bypass anything about conditioning and childhood Lattice, because that's not science, and it's irrelevant to the mechanics of the motor of the board and what causes the background. Okay, so I bypass all of that. So I may do a part 2, because this is a part of a greater work, as you all know, of mine. Now, so it would be very in depth, but it can be applicable to specific scientific words to a certain point, obviously, because we're speaking about a specific area of space, so it just goes with that, the fundamental nature of what that of what those variants consist of, and it is formatted there like that. But it goes into the study of a wider field, of what is beyond it, that causes this to be able to maintain and have maintained and remain a collective heartbeat, mind, consciousness, but a collective consciousness, not the actual whole of the mind of what we're speaking of, the universe as a complete and total format. So we're going to leave it there. Bye.